Oh, bonitas, oh, goodness. It was the phrase associated with St. Bruno, whose feast it would be today. He had, as the testimony of the time gave it, festo vulto. He was always with his face in feast, the beam in the eye, and that attracted. These founders of monasteries and orders are magnets. Eventually, because he had links with the one who was elected Pope, he had been a pupil of his when he was at Reims, he was called to Rome. He was a very capable man. Eventually he was offered a bishopric, but he refused, and he pleaded with the Holy Father, "Please let me go." Moreover, the brethren were so discouraged after his leaving that they started to move from the Grande Chartreuse, and according to the story, she appeared to them. Stay. Still there to this day. Numquam reformata, quia numquam deformata. Never reformed, because never deformed. You may notice that she has her mantle over them. The same image actually was found at La Trappe, over the main portal. The mantle of the Virgin over her own. In the Carthusian order there is a very ancient and beautiful devotion to the Blessed Virgin, the office of Beata in parallel to the office of the day. Therefore, two offices, plus a third when it came to the office of the dead, a day. And the Missa de Beata on one of the altars each day, and that was offered for occasions. A quaintness and a purity, for the world was kept at bay, only the sound of silence, and solitude very well protected. So well so that they weren't amused when it came to things like writing. But there was goodness, and there still is. And I remember about 3 times my novice master had been made prior elsewhere, pleading with the authorities to let me go to him. And he phoned just on the vigil of my ordination, "Do you remember your old novice master?" He found my number and wanted to show he was there. And years again, later on, after doctorate, he pleaded again, "Let him come to me," and the order wouldn't let him. But anyway, all these things to say that if it could have been otherwise, it would have been otherwise, and I wouldn't be here today. But the providence of God is what it is. But what I tell you is this: what worked, works still. And there are no shortcuts to contemplation. Do you know that when it came to the crunch, the Carthusians alone stood out in England at the beginning of the terrible Protestant transformation, which came subtly, little bit by little bit, in such a way that people didn't realize. Do you know what happened? They went into prayer mode together, wanting to know what to say to the authorities. First of all, with regard to things like the king's right of succession, all this business of who is the queen. And do you know what happened? As they sang the Mass of the Holy Spirit at the high altar, tongues of fire appeared over them, hovering over them. And they knew they, despite the silence of the bishops, had to speak, and they did. And they had an awful, awful time. The butchery being shown to this day at the London of the Parkminster Charterhouse on the walls of the chapter room. The beginning of a huge army, of which the last was Oliver Plunkett, much later in time. They're starting in 1534 and going up to 1681. Butchery upon butchery. And you know that the authorities have to be bribed to get hold of the burning head of Oliver Plunkett. That's why there's a slight bit slightly tarnished there at Drogheda. But there were stories, as there would be in a family, handed down. When I was put in cell, one of the first things I was given to read was, in France now, the story of These Our Fathers in England. What happened? And there are very quaint things going on, for the frontier between heaven and earth is not so dense as we think. One day, as the tension was building, a young monk who was not very faithful to his vocation and not yet ordained was in his cell, and he was also helping a dying brother who was good and faithful and humble, the lay brothers. As he was about to die, the brother, the choir monk, whispered in his ear, "Brother, they say that sometimes souls can go back and give word. Will you make me a promise? If you get safely to the other side, can you come back and give me word?" And he petered out with that kind of yes. He'd lost contact with him and had forgotten the episode. But one day in his, what we call the oratory, it's the prayer part of the cell, he was praying, this other one, and appeared before him in great glory. You know what he said? "I am, yes, in great glory. But the priors who have just been sacrificed are in a far higher place again." That's what the glory of martyrdom is. Augustine Webster, John Lawrence, and so on. Off they had gone to the highest place. John Horton. And he was warned, "Be careful. The way of the king is not the way of the Lord. Take heed to thy soul." With that he disappeared into glory. Alas! He didn't listen and lost the crown of martyrdom and compromised. Went over to the continent to be safe. And the bishops also compromised. All but one, who was already a holy man, John Fisher. And of course it was left to Thomas More, who saw them go to Tyburn from the chink in his cell in the Tower of London, and said to his daughter, "Meg, see how they go. As joyful as bridegrooms going to the wedding feast." My brethren, in a time when things are negotiable, it seems, we need to remember that this cost a lot to those who went before us. And a little aside, do you know what happened to that brother? He was always grumbling. And he was heard to mutter one day, as they gave him his food through the guichet, "I'd rather eat a toad than that kind of stuff." And the Lord gratified his wish by an infestation of toads, which he tried to burn, and it caused an awful stink in the cell. And they multiplied and multiplied. So the Lord in his wit was saying, "Be careful." And yet he wouldn't listen. And we also won't listen. Be warned. Our age is very similar to that of the 1930s, 1938, when things could really go wrong in a short time, and nobody on earth is aware of what could hit us, it seems, for we have only human means at our disposal, and they'll be what they are. So it's not for no reason that heaven has inspired the Holy Father to ask us all to take seriously the warnings of heaven, and tomorrow, the day of the Rosary, to say this prayer of the simple people that won battles in the past and brought peace to the world, and also, yes, to fast. We need supernatural means, my friends. We're under attack in the church and on the planet itself. And if these bombs go off, they can get bigger and bigger. And you know what I mean. Perhaps Our Lady was already dropping a hint more than 100 years ago when she said that if people didn't listen, there would be another war. She was referring to the second one. But it could be again that if we don't listen to heaven, we could have to face the consequences ourselves. God is real. I conclude. I saw how real he was precisely in France. There was a huge renewal going on despite all the loss in the 80s. Things being born, new congregations multiplying, becoming powerful internationally. And I was there one night, and it was as though we were touching heaven. I remember at Ars, where there had been so many miracles before with the Cure of Ars. Miracle upon miracle. Thousands upon thousands more over France. It was the real thing. And they were all being recorded and videoed. It is as though we were touching the finger of God. And the instinct was to applaud the Lord. And it was being told to us, keep silence. The Spirit wanted silence to act. That applies to us everywhere. The Spirit needs silence to act. And they carried on. Miracle after miracle, prophecy after prophecy accompanying them. Things were happening and all recorded. This was the early church. The power of the Pentecost still there. Unchanged and unchanging. Claim what we have, but under the means that we have. The prayer of the little people. The simple prayer of the Rosary, which can change world history, especially if accompanied by that specific request for fasting. I just conclude with one reminder. Lebanon, which is under bombardment right now. We can invoke this saint of Lebanon at this time, for he is a great wonder worker, Charbel, and miracles have never stopped happening around his body and the oil that oozes from it. We can also invoke the other little saint of the area, Mariam of Jesus Crucified, the little stigmatized Palestinian nun. God, give us peace through the intercession of the communion of saints and these powerful giants that have gone before us in the same way. For St. Charbel also opted for total solitude, where heaven and earth meet eye to eye.